Hello, my name is Sage. On Christmas Eve, my mother raised a glass to my brother like he'd carried the whole family on his back. Then she looked at me, in front of everyone, and said, "You never showed up when we needed you." I'd paid their rent for 11 years. That night, I shut off every payment, every account, every silent sacrifice they'd grown to expect. The next morning, I woke up to 68 missed calls, but none of them said sorry. They erased me in a single sentence after over a decade of invisible loyalty. And now they want back what I quietly held up for years. Do they even remember what I gave up to keep their lights on? Or do they just miss the convenience of me? The driveway was full by the time I pulled up. Red and green lights blinked along the trim of the house, the old ranch-style home I'd wired money toward for 11 straight years. I sat in the car for a beat longer than I meant to, watching the silhouettes moving inside. Through the window, I could see the shadow of my mother's arm, lifting a wine glass. I already knew the script. I'd written the damn prologue with my bank account. Inside, the house smelled like pot roast and cinnamon. There were about 24 people, cousins I hadn't seen in years, distant relatives I didn't remember inviting me in the first place. I recognized Dorian's laugh from across the living room before I even saw his face. He was always good at filling a room. Charm came naturally to him. Mom used to say he had a gift with people. I guess the rest of us were just clutter. I hung up my coat in the hallway. Nobody noticed. That wasn't new. I slipped into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of the sangria my aunt always brought in her plastic jug, and stood off to the side, half listening to someone talk about a promotion, someone else's recent divorce. All of it was noise, a holiday-scented blur. My fingers gripped the glass a little tighter when I heard Mom calling everyone together. "Let's do a toast," she announced, as if it were a tradition, as if this moment hadn't been rehearsed in her mind all week. I tried not to roll my eyes. She stood at the center of the room like it was her stage, because it always had been. She thanked everyone for coming, then smiled in Dorian's direction. "To my son," she said, her voice catching just enough to feel deliberate. "To the one who's always been there when we needed him, the one who shows up, who carries this family in his heart." The clapping was instant, loud, warm, expected. Then she turned her gaze to me and twisted the knife. "And as for the other one," she said, raising her glass just a little higher, "well, she never showed up." There was a pause, just long enough for the silence to sting. A fork dropped. Someone coughed. I felt every single person glance at me without looking directly. Like I was something on the floor they weren't sure how to step over. I smiled. I didn't blink. I raised my glass and tilted it just enough to catch the edge of the string lights. A little silent sparkle. And I swallowed the sangria like it was water, like it didn't burn on the way down. My mother's voice faded into a new conversation, and the music resumed. But I wasn't really in that room anymore. My body was. My breath. My bones. My blouse I had ironed twice this morning. But the rest of me? Already elsewhere. They said I never showed up. I had paid their rent. Every month. $1,250 for 11 years. I covered the electric bill when Dad's job dried up and nobody would admit he wasn't going back. I paid for Mom's emergency dental work, twice. I bought their groceries when Valora said her shoulder hurt too much to lift bags. I sent gift cards for Christmas so they could give them to others and pretend they came from them. I did that. Quietly. Steadily. Every month, like a utility they forgot needed to be paid. I never needed a thank you, but I never expected to be erased either. They acted like Dorian was some kind of savior. He showed up for birthday cake and backyard beers. He called Mom on Sundays, when it was convenient, but when the mortgage was about to slip into default, it wasn't Dorian's voice on the line with the lender. It was mine. And now she stood in a room full of witnesses and rewrote the story. I had always known I was the invisible one. But this wasn't just omission. This was deletion. I excused myself before dessert. I said I had a headache, which wasn't a lie, even if it wasn't the whole truth. No one tried to stop me. Dorian didn't ask if I was okay. Mom didn't walk me to the door. She didn't need to. She had already said everything she wanted to say. I slipped on my coat, found my keys, and stepped back out into the night. The air was sharp, not freezing, but enough to tighten my lungs. The sky was empty, no snow, no stars, just that buzzing hum of a neighborhood trying too hard to be joyful. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need noise. I just let the quiet hold me while my mind began making a list. Not a list of grievances. I was past that. A list of numbers, a list of facts, payments, missed holidays, emotional receipts. I wasn't crying. I wasn't raging. I was calculating. They said I never showed up. Maybe this time I wouldn't. By the time I got home, the outside noise had faded, but my thoughts hadn't. The city had gone still, holiday still, where even the air felt padded like it was trying not to interrupt anyone's plans. My apartment greeted me like it always did, clean, quiet, untouched by family politics or wine-stained toasts. I set my bag on the hook by the door, kicked off my shoes, and stood there for a moment with my hands still on the straps. I could still hear the clapping, the way Mom's voice didn't crack when she erased me, the way everyone smiled and nodded like it made perfect sense. Dorian got the applause. I got the echo. I moved into the kitchen, put the kettle on. Didn't want coffee, didn't want wine, just something warm in my hands, something that didn't ask questions or pretend not to know the answers. The tea bag sat too long in the cup. I didn't bother timing it. At the table, I opened my laptop like I was checking work emails, but I wasn't. I wasn't thinking about deliverables or deadlines or Monday. My fingers hovered over the trackpad for a moment before clicking open the financial folder I hadn't touched in months, the one labeled Family. Inside, every wire transfer had a date, every grocery order, bill payment, credit card balance. It was all there, neat, documented, time-stamped with every instance I didn't show up. I didn't scroll through them. I just stared at the folder name for a minute, breathing. That label, Family, looked ridiculous now, like calling an old flame home after they changed the locks. I remembered another Christmas. 6 years ago. The living room had gone dark. Power shut off the night before. No warning, no mention. Dad claimed it was a mix-up, but I'd seen the bills in Mom's drawer. Final notices stacked like junk mail. I transferred $387 that morning from my savings. Skipped the holiday trip I'd planned to Lake Tahoe with coworkers. Instead, I drove to the house with a flashlight and a backup charger. By the time everyone arrived for dinner, the lights were back on, and nobody asked how. They assumed Dorian made a call. They always did. He had the perfect cover, proximity. It didn't matter that I was the one wiring the money. It didn't matter that I read every line item, negotiated with PGE, or that I waited on hold for 42 minutes while a customer service rep sorted out the reconnection fee. All that mattered was who showed up for the hugs. Mom once told me, with a laugh, like it was an inside joke, "Boys give us presents, girls give us pressure." I didn't laugh then. I sure as hell wasn't laughing now. The kettle whistled. I poured the water, watched the tea swirl and settle. Then I sat back down, pulled up the auto payment tab, and started canceling. First, the joint utility account. Gone. Then the recurring rent support I'd quietly maintained since 2012. Suspended indefinitely. Emergency credit card? Frozen. Groceries? Terminated. The family phone line I paid for but never used? Closed. I deleted the family folder, not because I needed the space, but because it no longer made sense to keep a record of a contract only one party had honored. I wasn't doing it to be cruel. I wasn't even angry in that moment. I was precise. I was clean. "You said I never showed up," I whispered into the quiet. "Let me help you feel that for real." I didn't think I'd feel anything afterward. No rush of empowerment, no vindication. Just weight shifting, like shrugging off a coat I'd been told was mine to carry. Later, I found myself checking the family group chat, not because I wanted to talk, but out of muscle memory. I tapped the icon, blank screen, group unavailable. I tapped again, thinking maybe the app glitched. Then I noticed the new title of the thread, Just Family. I wasn't in it, removed, silently, like a stain scrubbed from a white shirt before company arrived. No notification, no message, just gone. I stared at the screen, not in shock, but in deep, dry confirmation. Of course, the second I stopped making things easier for them, I became inconvenient, and nobody likes to host inconvenience at Christmas. It was funny in a way, not ha-ha funny, but the kind of dark humor you whisper to yourself in the middle of the night. The kind that makes your chest shake while you sit in a kitchen chair that's colder than it should be. I poured the tea down the sink, cold already, just like everything else. It was almost 2 in the morning when the first text came in. "Can you talk?" From Mom. I didn't respond. I didn't even open it. I powered the phone off, held it in my hand like a dead thing, then turned it back on. The screen lit up, buzzed. 1 missed call, 2, then 5, then 13, 38, by dawn. By the time the sun pushed through the cracks in my blinds, it was 68. Still no apology, still no recognition. Only panic, because their safety net had snapped. And that silence they handed me at the Christmas toast, they were finally starting to hear it echo. They thought it ended with a canceled boat ride, a minor glitch, a hiccup in the vacation schedule. It didn't. By 6:17 the next morning, I had 38 missed calls. They started quietly, maybe every 20 minutes or so. Valora trying to mask her panic in restraint. Then, like someone had pulled the pin from a grenade, the pace picked up. Voicemails stacked on top of each other. Texts blinked in, unread. My phone looked like a dashboard warning light going off, over and over again. I ignored the first dozen. I wasn't ready to hear their voices yet, not after last night, not after what they said, and didn't say. I sipped my lukewarm coffee and stared at the pine outside my window, still wearing a string of white lights I'd put up for no one but myself. It blinked gently, like it had no idea the world had changed overnight. I played the first voicemail around 7:10 a.m. It was Valora. "Sage, where are you? We're getting ready to head out," and her voice dropped into that carefully crafted worry tone she used when she wanted something. "The boat said the payment didn't go through. You didn't cancel anything, did you?" No greeting, no "good morning." Just immediate concern about appearances. The second voicemail came in minutes later. "Dad, always late to the party. Hey, honey, just wondering if everything's okay. Call us back when you can." It sounded forced, like he knew he had to say something but didn't quite believe it would help. The third, Dorian. "Sis," he started, casual and irritatingly upbeat. "Look, Mom's kind of freaking out. I'm guessing you're still mad and fine, fair. You made your point, okay? You got us all scrambling. Real cute. Now can you please reverse whatever you did so we don't look like idiots standing on a dock with no crews?" That was his idea of diplomacy. I didn't answer. I didn't respond. But I didn't delete them either. By noon, the missed call count had reached 68. Not one voicemail said, "I'm sorry." Not one message acknowledged what she'd said in front of everyone, that I had never showed up. Not a whisper of regret, or recognition, or shame, just noise, just panic. They didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of me. As I refilled my coffee, I let my mind drift to my 35th birthday. I was working double shifts that week, handling 2 major audits for a client I didn't even like. The plan was to take myself out to dinner that night. Nothing fancy, just a nice steakhouse with a bar seat and decent lighting. But around 2 p.m., I got a call from Mom. "Sage, I hate to ask, but your father's root canal, it's going to be $1,750 out of pocket. Can you cover it today before 5 so they don't cancel the appointment?" I paid it. Canceled the dinner. Went home, ate leftovers in my pajamas, and opened Facebook. Valora had posted a photo of her and Dorian having dinner at some Italian place in Midtown. Caption: "So grateful for the child who always shows up when it matters." I didn't say anything then, didn't call her out, didn't even comment. I just internalized it, like I always did. It wasn't a single insult that broke me. It was the accumulation, the way it all calcified over time, like hardened plaque no one thought to clean out. I picked up my phone now, not to text, not to forgive, but to answer. It rang again. Dorian. I let it buzz once more, then finally hit accept. "Hey," I said flatly. "Sage," he sighed, like he'd just finished jogging a flight of stairs. "Thank you. Look, we just need to get on the boat. And they said it's not paid. And the cabin, what's going on? You really don't know? Look, it was just a toast, he said quickly. Mom gets sentimental. You know how she is. No, Dorian, I replied, steady. You were there. You heard it. You didn't flinch. You didn't say anything. You raised your glass like the rest of them. Come on, he said, shifting into that dismissive tone he'd used since we were kids. You're blowing this way out of proportion. She didn't mean it like that. You think I'm overreacting? I think maybe you're being a little dramatic, yeah. I paused. I could have yelled. I could have rattled off the rent payments, the medical bills, the surprise roof leak I paid to fix 2 winters ago, but I didn't. I'd already said everything that needed saying, just not in words. I'm not reacting, I said softly. I'm recalibrating. There was a beat of silence on the line, then a weak chuckle. That's cute. No, what's cute, I continued, is watching everyone scramble when I step back for once. You think this is some power move? I think this is the first time I stopped being the default solution to everyone's problems. Dorian's voice tightened. Well, now they can't get on the sightseeing boat. It got canceled. Something about a declined card. I picked up my mug again, took a slow sip. That's correct. I heard him exhale, frustrated, but not surprised. Come on, Sage. This isn't you. You don't know who I am, I said. You only know who I've been when it served you. He didn't have a response for that, just quiet. We sat in it for a moment, both holding our breath. And then I ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the counter and walked away from it. That was the first time in my life I had taken something back. It wouldn't be the last. When they pushed again, I pushed back. It started with a text from Valora at 8:22 a.m., short and sharp. Did you forget to reauthorize the grocery service? No greeting, no question mark in tone, just in punctuation. I let the screen dim and left it unanswered. The automated service had been paused at 11:04 p.m., 2 nights earlier. I remembered the timestamp because I'd double-checked it 3 times before confirming, not out of spite, out of finality. Half an hour later, Dad's voicemail came through. Hey, Sage, just letting you know your mother's upset. The cable's out again. Could you maybe look into it when you get a chance? It wasn't a request. It was a reflex. They'd trained themselves to reach for me like I was a light switch, something that would just turn things back on. I didn't return the call. By noon, an alert pinged in my email inbox. Automatic rent transfer unsuccessful, recipient account inactive. I took a breath, closed the email, went to water my plants instead. Each task I chose that morning, rinsing my mug, trimming the basil, folding a pile of laundry, became a quiet protest, a domestic declaration of independence. I wasn't going back, not to being the emergency contact no one ever acknowledged until something broke. Later that afternoon, I sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly. The guilt tugged at me the way it always had, a soft pull behind the ribs, like an old injury trying to flare. Then I remembered the roof. That winter, the storm came in stronger than predicted. Dorian was between jobs. Again. Valora called me mid-meeting with HR. There's water coming through the ceiling in the back bedroom, she'd said, like I had summoned the rain myself. I wired $6,000 within 2 hours. And then, 2 weeks later, she posted a picture of Dorian standing next to a ladder holding a wrench he didn't know how to use. The caption read, "Our boy made sure the house didn't fall apart." That photo stayed pinned at the top of her Facebook page for 8 months. I remembered sitting at my desk, staring at that post with my mouth half open. I didn't comment, didn't like it, just closed the browser and got back to work. They let him wear my fingerprints. And the worst part? He didn't stop them. My phone lit up again that evening. Valora's name. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? This is childish, Sage, she said immediately, not even a breath between connection and accusation. I expected better from you. I leaned back against the counter. Better than what, Mom? I asked calmly. Better than paying your bills for over a decade? Silence. Just air. Like she didn't expect me to answer back. I'm not asking you to make a scene, she tried, but you've made your point, haven't you? Now you're just being difficult. Did you apologize? For what? She snapped. There it is, I murmured. A beat passed. You're twisting everything, she huffed. Your brother and I… You mean the son who watched you erase me and said nothing? I didn't yell. I didn't need to. My voice was steady, low, sharp. You stood in front of everyone and told them I was absent, after I spent my 30s making sure you didn't lose that house. I never asked you to, she said. You didn't have to. I hung up before she could reply. I sat there afterward, phone still in hand, thinking I might call back, maybe say something softer, but I didn't. Instead, I opened my messages, scrolled to the bottom, and found an old draft I'd written months ago. It was half apology, half boundary, the kind of message you never send, but write to get the weight out of your chest. I hovered over it, edited a few words, then hovered again. I remembered my 35th birthday. No cake, no card, no call. I had worked a double shift that day, helped an intern get her first raise, finished an audit that saved the company thousands. That evening, I transferred $1,500 to Mom's dental specialist to prevent her from being dropped as a patient. Later that night, she posted a photo of Dorian bringing her soup. He's always there when I need him, she wrote. That draft message? I deleted it, emptied the trash. Around 10 p.m., a new text came in from Dorian. Just fix it. Don't make this a war, Sage. There it was. Not let's talk. Not we're sorry. Fix it. Like I'd broken something. Like my absence was the actual offense, not their treatment of me. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my email, attached the mortgage documents, and forwarded them to him with one line in the subject field. Shared mortgage transfer record. Owner change denied. Let them feel what it's like to hit a locked door. I got up and made tea, not out of ritual, but for heat. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from release. This wasn't a war. This was the moment I stopped offering peace where there had never been a treaty. Turns out, they weren't done either. 2 days had passed since I hit send on that mortgage file. I thought that silence would speak for itself, that maybe, finally, the facts would shut them up. But some people don't respond to truth. They respond to losing control. And for the first time in their lives, I wasn't under theirs. That Thursday morning, I woke up to a long, scathing email from Valora. It wasn't titled I'm sorry, or even let's talk. The subject line was, this is not how family works. I didn't open it immediately. I sat at my kitchen table with my usual cup of green tea, staring at the subject like it had teeth. Eventually, I clicked it open. Not because I was curious, but because I already knew what it would say. I just needed confirmation that she hadn't changed. She hadn't. Paragraph after paragraph, it was guilt wrapped in nostalgia, laced with half-truths and pointed questions. After everything we've done for you, you're tearing this family apart. We didn't raise you to be this cold. We never asked for money, Sage. You volunteered. And my personal favorite, you used to be generous. Now you're just angry. I laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, more like a single huff through my nose. They always say you're angry when you finally start saying no. After finishing the email, I typed a reply. Effective immediately, I will no longer be covering any expenses related to the house. That was it. No flourish, no apology, just a line in the sand. I hit send. 10 minutes later, Dorian called. I didn't answer. He texted instead. Was that really necessary? I forwarded him a scanned copy of every payment I'd made on the house over the last decade. The mortgage chunks, the water bill when the pipes burst. The $1,800 I paid to a roofer named Tim Hastings, whose number I still had saved in my phone because no one else bothered to deal with repairs. Then, I attached a notice from the bank. Dorian had tried to transfer the title into his name last summer. I'd caught it, quietly blocked it, and said nothing. Until now. Subject: shared mortgage. Owner change denied. I didn't add a message. I didn't need to. Less than 30 minutes later, I got a text from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Delphine. Dorian's ex-girlfriend. She and I were never close. Honestly, I thought she had dodged a bullet when she left him. But her message was simple. I never told anyone, but I always knew it was you. You saved that house. That line hit me harder than all of Valora's bitterness. Someone saw me, and it wasn't even someone in the family. Later that evening, I found myself replaying a memory I hadn't touched in a long time. It was the day my boss died. I'd been at that job for 9 years, built a department from scratch. He was a mentor, not perfect, but decent. When he collapsed in the parking lot, I was the one who called 911. I held his hand while the paramedics worked on him, even though he was already gone. That night, I called my mother. I just needed someone to talk to, someone to sit in the ache with me. "Can we talk later?" she'd said. "Dorian just came over." And that was it. That was the moment I stopped reaching out when things hurt. Because in her world, presence mattered more than effort. Appearances trumped substance. Dorian walked through the door and got a seat at the table. I sent lifelines and got nothing but silence in return. The next day, I got another call from Valora. I let it go to voicemail. She tried again an hour later, then again before dinner. On the third try, I answered. Her voice was shaky, not broken, performative, like she'd rehearsed it. "Sage, we just want to find a way forward," she said. "We can't go on like this." "You mean without me funding your life?" "That's not fair," she snapped, then softened her tone. "You don't want to break the family apart, do you?" I almost laughed again, but this time it caught in my throat. "I'm not breaking anything," I said, quiet but firm. "I just stopped holding it up." She was silent for a beat. "You think we don't appreciate you?" "No," I cut in. "I know you don't." She exhaled sharply. "You've changed." I got tired. Tired of what? Of pretending that what I gave was enough for you to see me. The line stayed quiet for a while. I could hear her breathing, shifting. Finally, she said, "You've made your point." "I didn't do it to make a point," I said. "I did it because I was done hoping for one." Then I hung up. I expected a wave of regret, some pang of guilt for not staying on the line, for not soothing her like I'd done my whole life. But there was none. Not even a tremor. Around 10:45 p.m., as I finished folding laundry, a new notification lit up my phone. Bank alert. Multiple failed login attempts on shared family account. Access temporarily locked. I stood in the hallway, holding a towel that suddenly felt absurdly heavy. I stared at the screen. They'd tried to access an account they no longer had control over, the one I had quietly removed their names from last week. The same account they used to just grab gas or handle groceries if the cards were maxed. I placed the towel on the bed, went into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, took a long sip, let them panic, let them scroll through their texts and voicemails, trying to figure out how the backup plan disappeared. I was tired of being the safety net no one saw until they fell. They erased me in front of everyone. I restored myself in silence. That morning started like any other, but the air had a strange tightness to it, like something was waiting behind a curtain. I made toast, watered the plants, cleaned the counters, my version of normal. Then I opened Facebook. There it was. A new post from Valora, time-stamped 7:04 a.m., a full family photo taken Christmas Eve, the same night she toasted Dorian for always being there, and erased me with one line. The caption, "Family means everything, even when some people forget that." My face wasn't in the picture. I hadn't even stayed long enough for the camera, but everyone knew who the message was meant for. The comments piled in faster than I could count. Church friends, cousins, the aunt who only ever calls when she's selling raffle tickets. Amen to that. You've always been the glue, Valora. Some folks don't know how lucky they are. It was sickening. I scrolled a little further, and there it was. Dorian had shared the post, adding, "Proud to be standing with the ones who show up." That word again. Show up. Like I'd been on vacation the last decade. I logged out without reacting, but I already knew what was coming next. When guilt doesn't work, manipulators shift the narrative. By lunchtime, it had escalated. Someone, probably Dorian, or maybe one of Valora's passive-aggressive committee members, posted a vague quote to their feed. Some people think money makes them right, but kindness is what matters. I didn't need to be tagged to feel the weight of it. Valora had liked it, Dorian commented with a folded hands emoji. This was a campaign now, a slow public smear, a retelling of events rewritten in real time while the rest of the family clicked like and nodded along. I got a text from my cousin Jasmine. "You okay? I know the post wasn't nice. Just ignore it. Just ignore it. People always want you to ignore the things that make them uncomfortable, especially if they benefit from pretending nothing happened. But I wasn't pretending anymore." The final straw came later that afternoon. An old friend from high school, Rachel, sent me a link. Saw this. Thought it was odd. "Isn't that your parents' backyard?" I clicked. A GoFundMe page. Title: Help us keep the family home. Goal: $25,000. Photo: Valora and Dorian standing in the backyard. I rebuilt after the last winter storm, the one where I'd paid out of pocket to replace the fence and restore the patio. The story read like a soap opera: health issues, financial setbacks, and a daughter who had decided to separate from the family for personal reasons. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. They had used my silence against me. And now, they were raising money from strangers while painting themselves as victims of abandonment and using images of the very repairs I'd paid for. It was like watching someone sell your coat while you stood outside in the cold. I didn't cry. I didn't call them. I didn't even yell. I gathered my receipts, literally. Every payment, every wire, every contractor quote, every line item from the past 11 years. I screenshotted them, labeled them clearly. Then I opened Instagram and posted a simple, silent carousel. No names, no attacks, just a photo album of numbers. Transfers: $1,250 x 132 months. Roof repair: $6,020. Emergency dental bill: $1,740. Winter propane refill: $408. Back fence rebuild: $3,380. GoFundMe photo location: my money, my labor, no credit. At the bottom, one line in plain text: just for record keeping. It was posted by 5:45 p.m. By 6:30, the GoFundMe was offline. No one told me why. They didn't have to. I watched as Dorian deleted his folded hands comment from earlier. I saw Valora take down her post, quietly, without admission, and then the messages started coming in, slowly at first. "Sage, I didn't know you covered that much." "Wow. That's a lot. Why didn't you ever say anything?" And the one that stopped me cold. I'm ashamed to say I believed them. Lavinia, my aunt, Valora's sister, the same woman who once told me, at a funeral of all places, "You know, your mother loves you. She's just not great at saying it." I didn't reply, not out of spite, out of peace, because I had nothing left to prove. It wasn't the big fight that won me back my dignity. It wasn't screaming at the Christmas table or writing long paragraphs about how I'd been wronged. It was the math. It was the paper trail. It was letting the evidence sit still long enough for truth to grow out of it. That night, I made dinner. Nothing fancy. Just pasta with roasted garlic and olive oil. I ate it by the window, where the lights on my tiny tree still glowed soft and warm. They had tried guilt. They had tried shame. But I had finally stopped giving them access to me. And the silence? It didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt like control. Closure doesn't mean healing. Some wounds scar quietly. 2 days passed after I posted the receipts. Nothing. No phone calls. No texts. Not a single ding from the people who once needed me every time the fridge broke or the power blinked. There was something almost eerie about the calm, like the quiet before a storm that wasn't sure it still had the right to arrive. I didn't expect them to say sorry. That ship had long sailed, but a part of me, the last stubborn thread of who I used to be, still wondered if someone might knock, Not because I wanted them to, but because I wanted to see if they had the nerve. Then it happened. Late afternoon, January 2nd. The sky was smeared with that dull, post-holiday gray, the kind that makes even clean sidewalks look tired. I was finishing up dishes when I heard the doorbell. Not a text, not a call, an actual ring. A sound that now felt foreign. I didn't move at first. I stood at the sink, dripping water from my fingertips onto the tile, trying to guess who it could be. Then I walked slowly to the living room window and pulled the curtain back just enough to peek out. There they were. Valora, Dorian, and Malcolm, standing in a line on my porch like a family portrait that didn't include me. No coats, no bags. Just them, bracing against the breeze like they had all the time in the world. I waited 30 seconds, maybe more, just to see if they'd knock again. They didn't. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. Valora was the first to speak. "We just want to talk." I nodded slightly. "Then talk. Out here is fine." Valora's eyes shifted, flickering down toward the welcome mat like it might grant her permission. "We didn't mean for things to come across that way," she began. "That way?" I repeated calmly. She swallowed hard. "You know how emotions run high." "We were just caught up in the moment." Malcolm looked at the ground, saying nothing. Dorian stood stiffly beside her, his arms crossed like he was holding in more than just cold. I didn't respond right away. I wanted them to hear the quiet. I wanted them to feel how different it sounded when they weren't filling it with demands. "You meant every word," I finally said. "You just didn't think it would cost you anything." Valora flinched. "You know I was proud of you." "No," I interrupted, not raising my voice. "You were proud of the parts of me that looked like you, the parts you could explain to people. Everything else, you rewrote." Dorian shifted. "Sage, we didn't come here to fight." I looked at him. He looked tired. Not guilty, just worn. "You're not used to people setting boundaries with you," I said. "So when I finally did, you called it war." Valora took a deep breath. "But you're our daughter." "And yet," I said, "you chose the version of me you preferred, and punished me for not becoming her." No one said anything for a long moment, not even the wind. Dorian's jaw clenched, then relaxed. His eyes welled up, but he didn't wipe them. For once, he didn't have a defense, not even a half-hearted deflection. Malcolm stepped forward, just a bit. "I should have said something that night," he muttered. "I saw the look on your face. I just didn't want to make a scene." "Scene?" I echoed. "The scene had already been made, Dad. You just watched it from the front row." He nodded. Slowly, like a man taking inventory of a house he thought was his, only to find he'd been renting the whole time. I stepped inside, reached for the envelope I'd placed on the table earlier that day. I handed it to Valora. She looked at it like it was going to bite her. Inside was a copy of the house deed, still in my name, still fully under my control. And a note, it read, "This was never about the house. It was about being seen." Valora didn't open it then. She just held it between her fingers like it weighed more than paper. "You still want us to move?" she asked. I didn't answer that, not directly. "I stopped being the backup plan," I said. "What you choose to do next is entirely your own." She looked away. Dorian rubbed his hands together, like maybe friction would create clarity. "We didn't mean to erase you." "You did. And then you kept doing it. You did it with your toast, with your silence, with every time you let someone else believe the narrative you liked better." Valora blinked quickly. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe not. "I'm not angry anymore," I added, not because I owed them comfort, but because it was true. "But I'm done." They didn't argue, and that silence, it wasn't satisfying, it wasn't dramatic, it just was. I stepped back, closed the door, no slam, no tears. Through the peephole, I watched as they hesitated, stood there for a beat too long. Then they turned. Malcolm paused, just for a second, almost looked back, but he didn't, and I didn't need him to. Letting go doesn't fix the past, but maybe it frees the future. The door had closed 2 days ago, but the weight of that moment still lingered in the apartment like the faint scent of someone who used to live there. I hadn't cried. I hadn't collapsed. And I definitely hadn't felt victorious. There was no cinematic swell, no invisible audience clapping for me. Just the soft click of a door latch and the dull realization that I was alone again, this time by choice. The kitchen had never felt so quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to pause when I passed it. I wiped down the counter with slow, unnecessary strokes. I wasn't cleaning. I was occupying my hands so they wouldn't remember how often they used to reach for people who never reached back. I sat on the couch later that evening with a blanket over my lap and the TV off. No sound, no movement, just the flicker of streetlights through the window and the dull pressure in my chest that didn't want to be called grief. Not anymore. It was something else. Not emptiness, maybe space. The kind you carve out after years of being pushed into corners. My phone lit up at 9:42 p.m. 3 new emails. One from the insurance provider, another from the mortgage account, the last from the internet company. I didn't have to open them to know what they said. Valora had failed to refinance the house. Their internet had been shut off. And Malcolm's medical insurance, previously attached to my employer's family plan, was now overdue and flagged for cancellation. I opened the emails anyway, scanned the headers, then hit delete. One by one. No guilt, no rescue, just a quiet confirmation that systems collapse when the person holding the weight steps away. The next morning, I found an old draft I'd written over the summer. It was a letter, not to any one person in particular, but to all of them. It began with, "Here's what you don't know." Then came the numbers, not dollar amounts, but birthdays missed, overtime shifts taken, weekends traded for utility payments, times I bit my tongue while Valora sang Dorian's praises, times I showed up without being asked, without being noticed. I'd written about the mortgage, the dentist bills, the nights I sat by my phone waiting for a simple thank you that never came. I wrote about the nights I cried quietly, not because they hurt me, but because they didn't seem to know they had. The letter ended with, "I showed up. You just weren't looking in my direction." I hovered over the file. Then I hit delete. They didn't deserve the explanation. They had already decided who I was. They built a version of me that fit their story, and now they could live with the silence that story required. That afternoon, I walked to the market. The wind had a bite to it, the kind that slides through your coat no matter how tightly you wrap it. I tugged my scarf higher as I waited in line outside. A woman ahead of me was struggling with 2 kids, one of them tugging at her sleeve, the other crying over a dropped juice box. She looked worn, not exhausted in the physical sense, but emotionally frayed, like someone who had been thanked too little and judged too often. As she paid, her youngest daughter reached into her tiny coat pocket and pulled out a soft scarf, wrapping it around her mother's arm. "Here," the girl said quietly. "You always get cold when you're sad." The mom blinked fast, then smiled weakly. She didn't say anything, but her entire face softened. That moment stopped me. Not because it was profound or dramatic, but because it was real, intimate, quietly loud. I turned away quickly, pretending to look at a shelf of canned soup I didn't need. That night, I sat on the couch with my tea and reread the letter Noreen had sent weeks earlier. "You were the one who kept the house standing," she'd written in blocky penmanship. "They just didn't see it." It didn't make things okay, but it helped me feel less invisible. I placed the letter in a drawer beside my bed, not out of sentiment, but because sometimes, when the world wants to convince you that you were never there, it helps to have proof otherwise. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail. Not from Valora, not from Dorian. It was from a real estate attorney. "We've reviewed the deed," the voice said clearly. "You have full legal authority to sell. Let us know how you'd like to proceed." I sat with that message all afternoon. I didn't hit delete. I didn't call back either. Instead, I brewed another cup of tea, opened my windows, let the winter air come in just enough to remind me I was alive. The house had once been my anchor, my obligation, my invisible chain. Now, it was just an address on a screen. I wasn't rushing to cut ties, but I was no longer tying myself down either. Letting go doesn't fix the past, but maybe, just maybe, it frees the future. It was a Thursday morning, and the light was soft through the kitchen window. That pale, golden kind of light that feels gentle on the skin, not demanding. I had just finished my second cup of coffee, the first one barely counting because I drank it half asleep while standing. But the second? The second meant I was awake, clear, ready. I sat at the small table by the window and stared at my phone. The real estate attorney's number was already dialed in, just waiting for me to hit call. I'd had it saved for weeks, but I hadn't touched it, not until now. I waited until the sun was fully up, plus until the air had lost its chill, until I could trust my voice to say the words without cracking in places I didn't want exposed. He picked up on the second ring. "Ms. Garrett?" His tone was warm, professional. "We got your message." "I'm ready to sell," I said simply. "Go ahead." There was a pause on the line, not long, but long enough to make space for hesitation. Maybe he expected an explanation, some story about emotional readiness or family decisions, but I didn't offer one. I had nothing left to explain. He reviewed next steps, promised the closing documents would be ready within 48 hours, and wished me peace. His voice was sincere. I appreciated that. But I didn't tell anyone. No texts, no posts, no group emails with passive-aggressive footnotes or just so you know disclaimers. I didn't alert the family chat or send a final farewell to the house like it was some sacred monument. Because after all the noise, about loyalty, about blood, about what it means to show up, the one thing I'd learned was that silence had always been the only language any of us truly understood. The decision hadn't been easy, but it had been clean. 2 days later, a text came from Lavinia. They're moving out. 2-bedroom rental. Thin walls. Small yard. That was it. No emojis, no smug commentary, just the facts. I stared at it for a long time, not because I felt joy, because I didn't. I didn't feel relief or victory either. What I felt was distance, the kind that's earned, not gifted, a space between what was and what now is, a kind of clarity that didn't need sharpness to be real. Dorian never contacted me. Not once. Valora, of course, leaned back into the cryptic social media posts. People don't always understand your heart. That doesn't mean your heart is wrong. Followed by, I've learned to stay silent when misunderstood. Time will tell who was real. I didn't laugh. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't even screenshot them to send to Lavinia. I just didn't feel a thing. And that was the reversal. Because for so long, I had been the one hoping someone would hear my side. Hoping someone would say, "That's not fair," or "She didn't deserve that." I used to want my name cleared, my truth believed, my version recognized. But now, they were the ones looking for sympathy, the ones fishing for validation, framing their narratives just right, hoping someone, anyone, would say, "Poor thing," hoping someone would repost their quotes and nod along. And I had no need to correct them. A week after the sale closed, something arrived in the mail. A hand-addressed envelope, Minnesota postmark. The handwriting was neat, feminine, unfamiliar. Inside, a folded letter and a photograph. The letter was from Noreen. "I named her Sage," she wrote. "I wanted her to grow up knowing that strength doesn't always look loud, that showing up doesn't always mean arriving with a smile or a casserole." The photograph was of a newborn, eyes wide open, a lavender blanket wrapped snugly around her, cheeks full, expression alert. On the back of the photo, taped gently, was a sticky note, "So she never forgets who came before her." I held the image in my hands for a long time. I didn't cry, but something inside me shifted, like a room that had sat messy for years finally being put in order, drawer by drawer, no deep cleaning, no renovation, just tidied. It didn't fix anything. It didn't rebuild bridges or reverse the years of splintering. But it reminded me that something could grow, even in burned soil. A few days later, I took a drive. No agenda. Just turned on the ignition and let the car guide me. I ended up near the old neighborhood before I even realized what I was doing. The streets were the same, though the houses seemed smaller now. Less mythic, less weighed down by memory. I slowed the car as I passed the house. The for sale sign was gone. In its place was a tiny ceramic gnome standing next to a potted cactus, where Mom's hydrangeas used to bloom. The porch had been painted a soft, dusty blue. The crooked mailbox I used to jiggle into place had been replaced with one of those sleek, modern steel ones that locked with a code. The curtains were new, drawn tight. No sign of the faded yellow ones I'd stared at 1,000 times back when I used to pull into the driveway with grocery bags in my arms and a heart full of something resembling hope. I didn't stop. I didn't get out. I didn't even roll down the window. I just drove past, slowly, deliberately, and kept going. That evening, I made dinner in my new place. It was smaller, simpler, quieter. But it was mine. The kitchen didn't echo. The floor didn't creak when I walked across it. The thermostat clicked once, and then hummed steadily. Not sputtering, not whining. There was no group chat titled Just Family, lighting up my screen with guilt-laced requests or backhanded messages. Just me. I folded the laundry, took out the trash, watered the little jade plant I'd picked up from a flea market vendor last month. He told me it was impossible to kill, even when neglected. It sat now on my windowsill, thriving. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the floor beside it, cross-legged, watching the last rays of sunlight dip behind the rooftops of my new street. There was no applause, no cathartic climax, no final speech, just peace. And that was enough. Because some stories don't end with closure. Some don't resolve. Some don't redeem. Some just end. And that's okay. Because they used to say I never showed up, that I turned my back, that I walked away too soon. But the truth, I showed up for myself. And that was always the point. Sometimes the deepest scars don't come from strangers. They come from the people who raised you, praised the wrong sibling, or rewrote your story without asking. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming dignity in silence. Have you ever been the one who gave everything, only to be treated like you were never there? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more real, emotional family stories like this one. Your voice matters here.